Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we are here to discuss some trailers as well as Marvel Zombies. Tater is here with me, not Tater is here with me. Tater, hello.
I've been here the whole time.
You've been
and we
waiting.
Definitely aren't recording this again.
We're definitely not recording this again because we just got. So, those of you who know Nate, Nate jumped in, like, one of your chats, like, hey guys, you going live soon, etc. But we're not going live because we're recording For What It's Nerd, of course. So a little bit of a blooper there. I might actually post it still as a short with a little blooper. Yeah. That might be quite funny, actually. Yeah. So anyway, you guys might see that at some point. That's quite funny. But yes, so we're here to discuss 3 trailers as well as Marvel Zombies. We have Star Wars Visions, Mandalorian and Grogu, Wicked for Good, and then, of course, Marvel Zombies. So we're going to have like a sort of 5-minute discussion on each trailer because we don't want to, overextend the episode. And then we're going to discuss, again, zombies. I'm going to keep saying it, apparently. So first off, Mandalorian and Grogu. Tater, you were starting to discuss it before, saying that essentially you're seeing it somewhat like a Rebels Season 5, right?
Yes, which, to be fair, I think Mandalorian, aside from seasons 1 and half of 2,
yes,
really were like distinctly their own show, and I appreciate that. Again, like I appreciate building into the world of Star Wars, but like I do think this is one of those, like, they're trying to blend. Okay, how much are we involving with the movies? How much are we doing this? How much are we doing that? And we'll talk about Visions and how that fully detracts from that. But just seeing this level of like, oh no, we're bringing in everybody. I think at times has really hurt the series, but at times really bolsters up. Like, oh my god, we're gonna get new viewers in here. We're gonna get people who loved Rebels. We're gonna get people who love like the original series. People who love the sequels. Like all these different including factors.
So what I find interesting about this, sorry, not to cut across you, but what I find interesting about this is if it was Marvel, I'd be like, yeah, like hearing about Spider-Man. I know a lot of people want to sing a solo Spider-Man movie, but what I like about Spider-Man is the guy who kind of teams up with everyone, right? He teams up with the X-Men, he teams up with Hulk, he teams up with the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, etc. He's that character, right? So when you see a Spider-Man movie that has the Hulk and you have in maybe Yelena and Punisher and that type of stuff, that's interesting to me because that is what Spider-Man has always sort of been in the comics. You read a Spider-Man comic and typically someone else is going to turn up at some point. He needs help from Reed Richards, or Captain America's there to save the day because, he's just down the road, or, anything like that, right? He has a close relationship with Johnny. There's millions of different variants on that, right? So for Marvel, it makes sense. For Star Wars, don't get me wrong, I do like it. I like to see recurring characters.
I love it. I love seeing it.
Yeah, but I think because it's not even so much. My concern is that it's not even so much the Star Wars universe; it's the Dave Filoni verse, and that's my concern a little bit. And I think this trailer really does sort of bank on you being hyped about Mando in general, or being hyped about Zeb. In some way, because that's really all the trailer gives. This was not a dynamic trailer. It was more like, do you know what it reminded me of? It almost seemed like they put a bit of test footage together and said, that'll do. Do you know what I mean? It didn't really have
I do know what you mean.
It didn't have like an impact as a trailer. Like there was no implication of what the bad guy was. I mean, we know who the bad guy is, of course, Thrawn, right? But there was no implication of it. Like if someone who hadn't watched Mando up to this point, or someone who hadn't watched Ahsoka, for example, watched this, I don't think they know what the fuck's going on. If I'm being completely honest.
Yes, that I completely agree with. However, I do think there are going to be draws for Star Wars fans of all kinds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
because, and also just sci-fi in general, which, for the listening audience, if you were not aware, Peralta has not seen Alien.
Okay.
And there's a certain star from said movie in this trailer. The queen of sci-fi herself, Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
And therefore, I was giving Peralta shit because he has not seen Alien.
Yeah, okay.
Literally her career.
So what I want to say on that is, it's not that I don't want to, it's that I never get around to it, okay? It's on the list. It's on the list. So dear listeners, I'm sorry. On the other hand, what I find, one thing that I think, so the way I see Sigourney Weaver is very similar to Obi-Wan in the prequel trilogy. And what I mean by that is there's certain people who come in, Ewan McGregor, for example, who sort of elevate a production regardless of what it's going to be like. And I think that's sort of Sigourney Weaver for me in this, in that very similar to how she came into the Defenders TV show, if you remember, for Marvel. That show was not ideal. It wasn't the best thing ever made. But she was a really compelling villain within it. And I think that's going to be the same here. She's going to be a very compelling character within this, to the point where I'm probably going to enjoy the movie to a degree because she's in it, if that makes sense. Which like, do you know what I mean? Like
I was saying, there's going to be aspects of this that draw in all sorts of fans. I mean, like literally a few seconds later, and I had the trailer pulled up, and I'm like running it on loop. It's one of those things where like the inclusion of the vulture droids, the inclusion of the little guys that are just like good baby, the inclusion of the hut, the inclusion of, I know you said they're not the Gorn, but they look like the Gorn,
Savrips,
and so that's going to bring in they're going to bring in like Star Trek fans. They're like, ooh, sick, giant lizard we get to fight. And of course the AT-ATs, right? Like you're going to see all these epic proportions in this movie, and it's like, oh, sick. I loved original Star Wars. I loved the prequels. I love the sequels. I love Sigourney Weaver. I love Star Trek. Like all these different.
There's definitely, don't get me wrong. There's definitely, I'm not excited about the movie. Let me make that clear. And I'm not going to watch it as soon as it comes out. That's not the question here. For me, it's that Dave Filoni, I think, is too wrapped in himself at times, and not in a horrible way. He doesn't do it on purpose, I don't think. I think he just kind of gets
it well every time.
He just gets kind of used to it, and I think that can be somewhat detrimental in certain ways. Like, for example, how sometimes he'll overwrite canon books. And remember, and I will say this till my dying day, Disney bought Star Wars and made everything that wasn't the movies non-canon so that they could make everything going forward canon. And yes, there's certain things that tweak. There's certain retcons that happen that make things better. For example, the way that Andor went and K2SO, to an extent, I understand why they did it. Yes, it was a one-off comic. Really, I don't think it should be done still if you're going to say you have everything be canon, or you should find a way to kind of make it work. But I understand that sometimes you need to slightly retcon something. That's fine. But if you totally ignore, like, for example, there's an Ahsoka book that was made, and one of the episodes of Tales of the Jedi just totally ignored that book. And it was that's kind of not cool.
Does it totally ignore the book? Because I mean, like I've listened to that book, and I think that there's an aspect of where, okay, I can see this book taking place between X, Y, and like between Tales of the Jedi, or like right after immediately. Like I think even her name, I think that was an allusion to it of calling her Ashla is a way to reference and honor that book. Don't get me wrong. Yes, it does like say we're going to kind of mind wipe because we don't want this to be exactly like that. I think there's enough elements in there that say, okay, from a certain point of view.
I understand.
It's a similar story. And it takes that honor along with mixing in, we're also going to have these aspects of the Sith come in.
I think if there was something akin to, and a lot of people comment on this when there's like a Marvel movie that adapts a comic book and doesn't really give kind of any reference to that comic book, I think it'd be a lot better. Do you know how, I mean, they for example, do play based on characters by, I would really prefer if shows were doing this type of thing to have based on the novel. I mean, they do it for like movies that are not novels. Do you know what I mean? Based on the novel by, and then the person's name, for example. And I think that would be a little bit more. That would ease my palate slightly, because it means that they care about that book, even if they haven't used that book to a T, right? Because there's always going to be a difference between, and this is part of it, right? There's always going to be a difference between different media. You know, a book can spend years with a character essentially in the matter of, a reading, a sitting.
However long,
Whereas, and games can kind of do that to a degree, right? But movies, really, you have to show a relationship developing within days or weeks. You know, a show maybe a little bit longer than that, but not much. So, like, I get it. But I think there's just certain ways to go about it. So that's why I always have a little bit of concern with Filoni now. And again, not to say I don't like his stuff, because some of the best Star Wars is some stuff that Dave Filoni has written. Like, let's be clear about that.
Hands down.
But
I think it was the same issue with George Lucas whenever he first made this universe of, okay, you did the first movie really well, you did the second movie really well, the third movie was pretty good. Like, and then as you get into the prequel eras, who really can check the God King Lucas. Like I
Yeah.
love his work. I grew up on the prequels. Like
Mm.
that was something I loved. I love the silliness. I didn't take the thing seriously.
Mhm.
And then you of course have your lore masters, who I will not go the quote unquote lore masters, who I will not quote in this podcast. I have a shirt for you and your
I
comments.
know who you mean.
Um, yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
We all do. Um, who just like, oh, reverential, like all George Dave Filoni still checks in with George. It is not something where he does anything super egregious to the point where like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do this. Don't get me wrong, he has his favorite characters. You know they're never going to die because just like when Nate DMs in our D&D campaign, he will make us suffer to the ends of the earth and never let us die. Unless we do something incredibly
Well,
stupid. But
so
these characters you have pre-written.
yeah,
So
what I'll say is though is it becomes a point. Like I personally, and I understand that it wasn't. It was somewhat a failing of the Disney merger, so to speak.
mhm.
But Asajj Ventress is now back alive again, right? And basically, Dave has at one point or another, any major character that has died has been brought back. And like, there's a point, right? And so like, I sit uncomfortably with that a little bit. I also want to say that I really think Mando season 3 nosedived, and we talked about this with how they did Moff Gideon, and I feel like that was a really poor villain. When it almost feels like they should have just dropped Gideon after season 2, and kind of moved on. And they didn't, and so they did the cloning
I
thing,
do
and that
think
was like so much like it didn't really feel. It felt cheesy in like an
well, I know you and I
unearned way.
disagree. I know you and I disagree on like that point. I don't I've started to like reflect on that and like I do agree that like I don't think they finished his arc. Like they had an idea for him,
Hmm.
but and again I mentioned this with my issue with Palpatine. I love him as a character. He has been one of my favorite
Hmm.
characters into the sequels where you have a great villain. He does really well for the first bits because he's like this ominous
Hmm.
unknown figure, and then you just kind of throw something that then you have to retcon throughout all the rest of your media. It kind of feels cheap,
Yeah,
and I think they did that with Gideon in season 3 of like, yeah, the cloning thing really wasn't. It didn't seem that prescient for Gideon. It didn't really feel
it
like,
didn't seem
oh,
about
this is
him.
what he's.
Yeah, it didn't
Yeah,
seem about him until it was. Yeah.
right. And I think that was part of my issue with Palpatine in the sequels. Of no, now that that's canon, we have to find a way to justify how this was getting developed throughout all of the
Yeah.
other shows because it happens in Bad Batch, it happens in Mandalorian, it happens in oh fuck, what was the other one? We'll just say those two for now because Rebels didn't really touch cloning all that much aside from the
No, well,
invention
Rebels
of
was
androids
already
and
out by
clones.
the time the sequels was really
Yeah,
finishing, wrapping up. Um,
exactly. So, but those main
but no, I
two
get it.
mainstays, you have to justify how on earth did Palpatine get to this technology because we thought we
Mhm.
couldn't clone Jedi, we thought we couldn't do this. Of course, that I'm sure that takes inspiration from the Force Unleashed games of how difficult is it to clone a Force
Yeah.
user.
Well, I mean,
It's a bit of fun in it.
Palpatine's son is essentially. We're going a little bit off
Yeah,
track, so we'll kind of course correct soon because we said we'll be 5 minutes,
yeah.
and we've
But
gone a
Star
lot
Wars,
longer
we're
than that.
passionate.
But Palpatine's son is that, right? So
Yeah,
Rey is born of basically the failure, the process going wrong, and obviously again that is a retcon. You're right. What I'll say is that. Palpatine wise, and I really shouldn't be talking about this because we're going way off track again. Palpatine
yeah.
wise, I think it's always sort of been something that Palpatine has worked on because it was sort of implied in all canon regards some comics, and I know we talked about that in passing the other day, and you said that was kind of a cheap thing, and I sort of agree, but it's always been sort of something that's been understandable within
Yeah,
Palpatine's
and I do think
character.
it's yeah, I do think it's been referenced. Don't get me wrong, like especially with the Zillo Beast, I was like, when
Hmm.
the fuck did they start cloning? Like, if they're gonna start cloning, it's a cool feature of the Clone Wars. The fact
Yeah.
that you have this technology and you're not going to use it, fantastic use of that. I think the issue is okay, but this isn't a force sensitive creature. I was fine with
Hmm.
that aspect,
Hmm.
but you're right. We're getting off track.
We are a
I
little
think
bit.
the only other thing I think the only other thing in the trailer that I was really excited for is the giant fucking mechs. Well, the droids. They're big droids. Because I'm just a fan for anything that's big and can smash and can be made into a video game that I can then fight. Because oh, oh my god, so much fun.
I'm excited to see. But the thing is, I'll close out with this, and we'll move on to visions.
Yeah.
The thing is for me is that when I see the next trailer, that's probably going to be more like a trailer. This still feels like test footage. When I see that, and I see sort of a more cohesive idea of what that story is going to look like, and know that it's not really going to retread old ground there, which it sort of is to a degree, but hopefully not retread too much old ground, I'll be a little bit more happy. I'll be a little bit more comfortable, but I'm not super happy with this trailer itself.
Yeah.
Totally opposite, talking about treading old ground, totally opposite, which is kind of, whether or not some of the episodes have been great, some of the episodes haven't, but visions across the 2 seasons I've really enjoyed in one way or another. And then season 3, of course, is here now. And they're going back to the roots, right? So they thought season 2 didn't quite work, going a little bit more expanded from the anime vibe. They're focusing back in on the anime vibe. And some of the episodes are continuations of season 1. And I really love some of these. So I don't know if anyone knows this. One of my favorite pieces of Star Wars fiction that has come out since Disney has done it is the book that follows the Ronin. So from the first season, and it creates a whole different Star Wars universe, but it is a really fascinating universe. If you've not read that book, read it. Again, I'm concerned that that's going to be retconned in some way in this in season 3, but I sort of don't care too much. I don't care too much because it's not really canon to begin with, which is what I was just about to say. Yeah. So, but looks really cool. I think some of the artwork in this is probably some of the best artwork in Star Wars. That might be very strong to say, but I think it's true. Not Ralph McQuarrie, but other than Ralph McQuarrie, but But yeah. So what do you think, Tater? What do you think?
Well, I think. So anime has never, I know, blasphemous, anime has never really been my full passion style kind of thing.
I'll agree with you on that.
Just because I like more realistic, how are you making this, again, why I fell in love with Star Wars is those practical effects. There wasn't major CG, there wasn't, they had to make those models by hand. And what I will say is I have learned more about the making and animating of different anime styles, and a lot of them are still very cool.
Yeah.
It's a well-respected art for good reason.
Yeah.
And I do think, especially with how the moment that I realized, okay, let's turn my brain off. This is a series of Star Wars episodes.
Yeah. It's not that deep, in the universe. Basically.
No, it's not that. Yeah. Thank you. It is not that deep. I don't have to I love Star Wars in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some of the good, some of the bad, some of the pieces.
I agree. Some of it can be stupid and still be enjoyable. You can admit that,
Absolutely. Oh, it's one of the stupidest things they've included. I still love Jar Jar.
Mm-hmm.
People can come with me about that. I do not care. I will stand by. Jar Jar is the comedian for the tragedy. He is that tragic character that is meant to be comedic, because you have to have some balance in there.
Let me kind of caveat that quickly now, and I'll let you go back. But for example, Jar Jar maybe didn't have his best place in the movies, but if you look at him in Clone Wars, he fits perfectly within the Clone Wars vibe, for example.
Beautifully.
That's so.
Especially early Clone Wars, where you have more of these this is a fun adventure. We're trying to build kids into it to where then we can traumatize them with real life stories of war, because war is tragic, and you don't want to do it.
You're right. Sometimes maybe they put the wrong parts in the wrong place, but Star Wars has always been more than just the sci-fi genre. Sci-fi is a genre unto its. Star Wars is a genre unto itself at this point. It has romance, it has thriller, it has all these different parts to it. So I think.
At the end of the day, this does go back to George Lucas's original inspiration for what he wanted Star Wars to be. He wanted it to be inspired by the samurai. He wanted that code of honor. He wanted that story of balance.
So you've really got that with Ronin, for example. Yeah.
Oh, beautifully so. But even then, even the references to say the mechs, when an R2 unit turns into battle armor at the end of the trailer.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah.
It's so cute.
There's some of that.
My active brain is just well, why wouldn't everybody do that? But then I'm no. It's fun, it's artful, and it respects the overall culture that George was pulling from.
Yeah.
So I appreciate those aspects. Again, I had to turn some of my critical brain off, because goodness knows.
You're right, though. They're going. It's the modern age sort of same thing is what you're trying to get across, right? You're saying that. Initially Star Wars pulled from samurai culture. Now Star Wars is pulling from Japanese anime culture, essentially, right? It's updating itself in a way.
Samurai films,
not
samurai.
Well, you know what I mean, though. Yeah, exactly.
A reference to, I'd like to specify those two.
No, definitely.
Film and reality are very
Oh yeah, of course they are definitely true. But you can play something. Sorry.
No. Much like Westerns are a reference to the Old West, that does not mean that's how they work.
Of course.
They are a dramatization. There's a saying, this is right, this is how it always... It's a little Manifest Destiny aspect, but for Japan. But it's still a beautiful film. It's still beautiful work, and it's so artful. Like, just gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, everything, all art is sort of artifice, right? That's half of the word. So it's not reality, definitely not. But what I think is really, I've never really thought of it quite like that before. But Star Wars has pulled from essentially Japanese culture of some kind in the past, and to see it kind of pull again in a very different way, but a very modern way. A lot of people love anime around the world. Again, I'm not the biggest lover. I know you've just said before, you're not the biggest lover either. But like, I can appreciate the art style, and I think anime actually has, especially some of these styles that we're seeing here, has some really beautiful coloring and really beautiful composition shots and stuff like that. Like, and Nate, for example, was talking about one in Rivals recently, where obviously it's slightly different, but because it's a Chinese company, but the impact frames on an Iron Fist MVP screen, and how gorgeous that was. And Star Wars is trying to do a similar thing here. They're trying to really pull from that anime genre, and I like it. Look, and the thing is as well, what I'll say is it comes back to what we've just said there, and some people will think that this is so out of Star Wars's bounds, and that's fine, but it's not that deep. This show is not that deep. It's never going to be that deep. It's not a canon show. It's basically Lego Star Wars, but not. And what I mean by that is it's funny. Again, it's funny. It's fun. Yeah. It's not meant to be anything crazy, and then you move on.
Right, and also not for all the Star Wars fans that are going to complain, quote unquote fans. Some shows aren't meant for you. That's okay. Yeah. If you're an adult and you didn't watch Clone Wars with us as kids, that's fine. That's okay. It's still a good show. If you didn't like any number of the things that Disney has produced, or any of the books that previously were published under George's license, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can all like different things from this, and it can be okay.
There's fundamental parts of Star Wars. I mean, I'd say I'm relatively easy to please, but there's fundamental parts of Star Wars that I hate. I hate Jackson the Rabbit, for example. I hate him, that leppy bastard. No, I'm kidding. I don't like it. I think it's an incredibly silly race, and they play him sort of like Deadpool-esque, not fourth wall breaking necessarily, but they play him sort of like that, and I don't really like him. I was kind of happy when they decanonized him. He's back now, but that's just the way it is sometimes. I just won't read it. I won't read a comic about him. You know what I mean? And move on with my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to engage with this. You don't have to. And that's the thing. I think that is one thing I do appreciate about your podcast, is the fact that you do give a bit of that, like, hey, here are the things I like and don't like, but also you give the parts that you love about the universe. So
I mean, my fundamental goal, and I think this is, I think we're seeing it more and more, what people want, and we'll go on to Wicked shortly, just so we're not doing the same thing again. What people want now, and I actually was watching something the other day from Jamila Jamil, who played Titania in She-Hulk, and obviously was in The Good Place as well. She was saying that the left has become so about, if you agree with everything I say, I like you. If you disagree with one thing I say, basically all the things we agree on are out the window. And I'm not saying that everyone's like that, but I'm saying there is a portion of the left who is like that. And don't get me wrong, we all still have a lot more in common regards against the right. Let's put it that way, or not even the right. Let's rephrase that, because we shouldn't out everyone as being, there's people on the spectrum, and there's people who are there's people who are racist, sexist, misogynist, all those types of things. Those are the people we should be against, right? People who disagree on certain things that are like more discussable are a different thing, right? And so this is what this podcast is about, not in the level of politics and stuff, but I think it's important to say. It was like last week when I came on here and I discussed the situation regards Jimmy Kimmel and Charlie Kirk, right? That's not really my position, but but as an entertainment point of view, there's something to discuss there, because really, if free speech goes, then all this is for nothing. All this stuff that I do every week is for nothing, right? I want to talk about shows. I want to discuss things. If we end up being not allowed to discuss media, then it goes downhill. So I felt like I should. And so this is what I do every week. I sit here and I discuss media, not just for the media itself, but in my head, because I think so many people are now obsessed with the idea that it's either woke or not woke. And just and it's made by assholes, or it's made by people who don't care about the source material. And this isn't necessarily always true. Some of it is, and if it is true, I'll say it. Saying that, for example, when I talked about The Witcher the other week, it's pretty factual. They don't care about the source material, the show. Sorry, that's true. If they cared about the source material, they wouldn't be changing entire parts of the story, like huge swaths of the story. But then will I sit here and say, for example, what I've just said about Mando, that the trailer was pretty ass, but the movie itself might be really good. That's me being fair and honest, right? And real and true and fair and accurate. But
and again, it's all about perspective, and that's
of course
that piece that people forget about all of this is there are going to be perspectives, and I think it's a great transition into Wicked.
Yes,
because I know we're going to talk about the trailer. I'm going to go ahead and reveal that I have seen the musical like half a dozen times in production. And so like the detraction of the films
is because you don't get that same energy, right?
I don't. But I also appreciate it's a different medium.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to be singing along with every single song
what I think,
I've listened to this. Yeah.
What I think has been really good for it, and sorry to cut across you there, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
What I think is really good for it is that, and I hope this is the case, people need to be reintroduced to certain forms of media. And what I mean by that is people don't go at the theatre because they see it as outdated. But when you see a story like Wicked be adapted for the screen and you learn about all the past of, is it Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel? Is that right? Is that the names? Yep. Yes! Look at me. I start looking into it. Like, I was reading about it. Like, don't get me wrong, I still haven't gone and watched it, but I was looking into it because I was interested. I wanted to learn more. Like, how's the stage production different? How are the books different? And they are very different, let me tell you now.
Yes. Absolutely. But like, as is the movie.
Yeah. But, like, that's what happens, right? Something becomes popular and suddenly people start reading into it and looking at it and digesting it and they become obsessed with it. And so people who might first love Wicked through the movies begin to love it through theatre as well. And this is what I think is so important, right? And this is why comic book movies really sell comics, because people want to see more of those characters, So I think sometimes I don't get me wrong, I think not everything needs to be a movie. I think not everything should become a movie. And I think more than that, I think there's a real place for the stage. I've went and watched productions of like The Lion King, watching The Lion King in a theater, and that's a movie that happened first, right? But the theater version is just something else. It's electric when you have the Circle of Life song and you have the actual, I mean, I don't know how different this is around the world, but here in London, when I went and watched it, the animals actually come down the aisles. And it's like, oh, this is so cool. You're in it. You're part of the Circle of Life. That's something you can't get in the screen. No. And I don't think people quite get that at times. But I'm kind of hoping that in a way this Wicked does that, because Wicked has become such a big phenomenon. And I will say, for me, I went and watched the first part of this with my gran. And we had such a good time watching it. And we have like a sort of funny story because we actually didn't get the seats we needed, and then we had to get some other seats, but they were at the back. And like I basically had to slyly get us some seats, but not. I don't get me wrong, I paid for them, but it was a whole story. I'll maybe tell it one day. But long story short is that I have a story and experience around the movie as well. And so that's just the movie itself. But like, and then watching the movie, I was crying my eyes out because it fundamentally the message of the story is about someone who is arguably fundamentally a good person, and then they're portrayed as being anything but to benefit the ruling class, so to speak, right?
Just you wait for the second part.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really, that's what I'm so interested in what they've put there. Now, a lot of people are saying about the color grading and stuff, and I don't really go into too much to that stuff. I think people get too hung up on these types of things. They get too obsessed with like, is the color of that exactly right? Maybe not, but like I think Yeah, I don't know why people get so obsessed about it. Like,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate like even in the trailer, the first few things that we see are the distinctions between pink and green, right? Because
yeah,
again, those are our
mhm.
major themes. Color. I think we discussed this. No, have we discussed this on a Peralta's Take before?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, we really ought to talk about color in movies because I could go into a whole
Yeah.
thing about that.
Hmm.
But it is that beauty and how it relates also to the political side of things is going to be how are people represented in media? How are
Yeah.
opinions represented in media?
Hmm.
Because in reality, eh, the quote unquote Wicked Witch, aka Alphabet,
Yeah.
is protecting other communities that are starting to be
Yeah.
repressed. But because that is considered to be wrong by the dominant society, the more
Madame Morrible. Yeah.
populist,
Yeah.
I'll say, yeah,
And
it's going to
Oz.
be a challenging thing to be vocal about that, but she knows it's right for her, and
Yeah.
therefore she's going to be made into a villain. The difference between a terrorist and a patriot are the victors.
Yes, exactly. And also, what was really fascinating about this trailer to me, and I think it's the most important line of the trailer, is Alphaba saying to Glinda,
Mhm.
"You have to see me through their eyes."
Through their eyes. Oh,
Oh, like
beautiful.
what a
Yeah,
line to like,
yeah,
because you understand that what she's saying is save yourself because if you stick with me, your reputation will be destroyed through this.
yeah,
Um,
and it's so heartbreaking. That's one of the
yeah,
worst. Like it is the most heartbreaking part of the
hmm,
first act of the actual show,
yeah,
is that I have to leave you now because
yes,
if you come with me, if I stay with you, one of us is going to die.
yeah,
And that is not, but both of us can exist separately, but it'll develop because you've seen the show now, and I'm
hmm,
not going to give any spoilers for the movie because obviously it's going to follow along a similar
yes,
trajectory. But like the aspects of how do I get to live as a person when I'm a political
hmm,
activist slash terrorist? Like what does this
yeah.
look like? All these different forms of how do we get to exist and how do we pursue life
Hmm.
because of these political
Yeah.
differences
And
are
obviously
really
there's
going
a
to shine in
romantic
this.
part of that as well as with obviously
Yes.
uh
I know, I forget his name
Fiero.
too. That yeah, Fiero, thank you. Yep.
Fiero. So, but what I have to say, and I don't want to go on. I want to try and get into zombies in a second. So,
Yeah.
which sounds like a really weird segue to say, but
Witches.
I've always been a big fan of Oz anyway, as a concept. I
Mhm.
really love The Wizard of Oz. I've watched basically every
Mm.
variation of The Wizard of Oz movies. And
Ooh,
also, what am I have such a fixation on Return to Oz, if you remember that, the
I
movie.
do.
I don't know
Yeah.
why, I just do. It always stuck with me as a kid, and it's one of those ones that I always go back to. So
Mhm.
I love kind of I think what I like about Wicked is it reminds me more of Return to Oz. And what I mean by that is Oz, like the Wizard of Oz, the main story is very cut and dry. And what I mean by that is very
Mhm.
like, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, this is the goal,
Yep.
do it. With Return to Oz, there's a lot more nuance, and the world isn't.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more grimdark in a way
Yeah.
that's quite interesting, and I think that's what I like about Wicked as well. And yeah, I just like spending more time with these characters, learning a little bit more about what they're like. It's actually funny. We were obviously a very different conversation, but we were playing Halo last night, and
Mhm.
Halo 1 is very cut and dry, right? You're fighting the
Yep.
Covenant, and the Covenant are the bad guys, right? And then in
Yep.
2, you start getting to understand the Covenant a bit more. And it's sort
Mhm.
of that kind of vibe, right? It's sort of that difference. And so that's why I really think
Yep.
Wicked is a really great piece of fiction that expands on Oz, but isn't Oz. You know what I mean? It isn't the
Yeah.
main universe, so to speak, but it's a really cool rendition of that universe. And being able to see something that has been so talked to me about, talked like I'm exactly the person that this was always like sort of aimed at, is that the person who was always interested in this universe to some degree, but for whatever reason didn't go to the theater production.
Mhm.
Largely because any good theater production is nowhere near to me. Like it
Yeah.
would be a while away. So
That is the trick.
yeah, exactly. So I think, as
That
opposed
was
to a
good.
cinema
Yeah.
that everyone has access to really these days, and
Yes.
if not the cinema, then eventually home movie.
Streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that has been a big barrier, especially for musical theater. And it's such a shame because having grown up in it, like from my teenage days on, I've been
Hmm.
in musicals and I've been a part of musical theater
Yeah.
and I've been part of music in general. It really is such a shame that's not more because yeah, you're right. The closest major theater that we had that would provide pretty much anything
Hmm.
Broadway was an hour and a half away, and that's
Yeah.
from a drive. So then you've got gas to account for. You got to make a whole evening
Yeah.
of it. Da 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 da. Like all these costs versus a movie, 10, 20 minutes, and then you sit
And
in the
if you need
theater
to
for 2
pause it,
hours
you
and
can.
go home. Right.
That's the thing now, right? And not that
Yeah.
that's always a good thing, but it just sometimes life just gets in the way, right? You know.
Yes. Right. And on top of that, if you really want to go back to a theater, it's going to be, or a movie theater, it is going to be much easier to go and say, okay, I watched the first half of the new Avatar, Way of Water, blah blah blah.
Yes.
We're going to start on that. So I can go and come back and watch the other one for about the same price. But a theater, you really can't quite replicate that same night
Yeah.
because they're people. Each and every performance
Yeah,
is going to have that
exactly.
slight difference.
Yeah. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad as well. I'm not saying that that's always the case,
Yeah.
but sometimes it will be. The quality of a movie arguably is the same. Well, people's opinions change, but it's the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I'll give the credit to, say, Hamilton. Hamilton,
Yeah.
one of the, not the first, but like a major.
Mhm.
Now it's on streaming. You can watch it anytime you want.
That's what I think would be a really cool thing for them to do. Personally, with more shows, is get a real like right. We know what we're going to do. We're going to get this nice live version. Because then at least theatre is being recognized, right? Yes, you're still watching it at home, but it's recognized. I've actually been watching a lot more of I forget what the place is in London now, but I've been watching a lot more theatre stuff, actually. Small snippets. I believe right now, or is it right now, or has it already been done? I don't know, but Gillian Anderson is doing a Streetcar Named Desire at the moment. I've been watching clips from that, and like, I love Streetcar Named Desire anyway. It's a really good play.
Fantastic play.
Really good social commentary. But Gillian Anderson as well, like, amazing actress. So like, watching pieces of that was great, and like I it's something I want to do more of, really. Maybe that's something I should try and do more of, try and get some more theater stuff on the channel.
Well, and that's where I will give credit to, because theater hasn't always been the most accepting of how do we start integrating this into the modern day, because for a very long time it was this hoity-toity, oh, you must go out to a night at the theater. Like, okay, get over yourselves a little bit, because it's going to be harder for people not to go choose to be an actor in a TV show or a movie versus being on stage. Don't get me wrong, being on stage is a very noble profession, and for people who have to do multiple shows a night,
it's hard.
learning lines within a month or two max, like that's, and multiple shows at a time. Yeah, absolutely. It is a full-time job and it is work. And so denying yourself access to larger swaths of people really starts to limit that aspect of this, which it is still enjoyable to go out and have a whole event surrounding it.
There are actually cinemas here that are starting to put theatre shows on in the cinema, which I think is a really great idea.
Oh yeah, that was the first time I watched Singing in the Rain, like the actual play, rather than the movie. Like I've seen the movie since I was a young kid, but watching the play, fantastic, like so cool.
My glasses were all over the place, and I was messing with them on camera, and I forgot we were live, not live, recording. So I'm like moving my glasses. I'm like, oh, we're actually, you know. But with that, I totally agree with all your points. I'm really excited to see more of it. I feel like we had more discussion about theatre than Wicked for Good, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think Wicked for Good is so involved in that, right?
It's going to be a commentary.
Yeah.
It is going to be a commentary overall. Fantastic trailer, great coloration, great inclusion of characters that I know they're involved in the play. They're more mentioned than physically seen a lot of the time, but that's because of the limitations of theater. Anyway, it's going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm going to, so this may be a bit of a diss on me. I have not seen the movie.
The first one.
I wanted to watch both.
No, I think that's perfectly valid. I'm actually planning to do sort of similar with Avatar. You said about it during this. I haven't watched the first. I watched the first one when it came out, but like I haven't watched the second one. I didn't watch the second one. I just didn't have time. So what I'm sort of thinking of doing is doing 1 and 2, and then going and watching 3, primarily because they're also updating the game as well. But that's a totally different conversation for another time. So Marvel Zombies, right? So
good transition.
First off, I think considering What If was such a flop in so many different ways, right? And don't get me wrong, I do enjoy a number of episodes of What If, just not the What If as a whole, right? Let's just say that straight out of the gate. I think it really lost the idea of what if should be, and what if should be crazy and like cool, and sometimes it was very lame and budget. You could tell it was to do with budget. What if was that? But Zombies, building on that one episode from What If, did a really good job of making a cohesive zombie story that actually came to a conclusion that was quite intriguing. Do you sort of agree with that?
So how do I say this?
Do you disagree?
Let's see. So, as a big fan of the horror genre, I know they're not always going. Spoilers for Marvel Zombies, obviously.
Yes.
I know that not everything is going to be a happy ending.
Yeah.
However, I do think that if they were going to leave this major of a cliffhanger without promise of a season 2 already, I don't think I would have watched this season. Which again, fair for their marketing to try and get people hooked in, but at the same time, I'm like, you're really going to leave us on Kamala, this isn't real. Like,
so I have some opinions on this. And I think this is going to be more of the discussion than anything else, because I think the rest of the episodes are actually very good, and it's sort of not really much to discuss about them. Not in the way of they're good, basically. Like, every character that shows up is interesting in one way or another. Seeing different versions of these characters is always cool. Blade Knight is really fun, and in fact, it makes me want the Blade movie all the more. I know you and Gigita were talking about this a little bit in Nate's Discord, so that's a little part of this. But yeah, I think Blade Knight was really cool. Some of the visuals were stunning throughout. Having some of the voice acting be done by like Elizabeth Olsen coming back for this was really fun, exciting. Seeing Wanda sort of in a more powerful state with and kind of having the moral side stripped of her was very interesting as well. That last line from her where she says, "And so the world begins again," very, very like, oh, I love that line. I don't know why, I just did. Right. Yeah, all that great. That ending, I think, is where we're gonna sit for a little bit. And what I think, for me, having read some of the Zombies comics, and I'm not saying that you haven't. I don't know whether you have or not. Sure. The Zombies bits and pieces. The Zombies comics end on sort of this note of, well, not end, but there's parts of the Zombies comics where basically the zombies have eaten all of the universe, and it's only them left, and they're hungry and they don't know what to fucking do. And I'm not saying that means that this show should have not had a good ending, but I think what was so interesting to me is that they really chanced it with that ending. And what I mean by that is shows have become so scared of having a cliffhanger because they don't know if they're going to get a season 2. That's where we're at in the market now, if that makes sense, because now everything's Netflix cancels it after one season. So you can't do cliffhangers anymore. You basically have to do, and it's funny, I can reference this now because a year ago I wouldn't have been able to, Korra. You basically have to do a Korra. And what I mean by that is you have to do a season and end it at the end of that season. And if you get picked up again, you have to start fresh the next season.
Yeah.
Right. And that can be detrimental sometimes because as opposed to, funnily enough, I can use this reference as well now, The Last Airbender, where you have 3 seasons that are a full story. You can't really do that in media anymore. And I get what you're saying in the sense that that's your issue is that you
I don't know if this is going to be
you don't know. That's the thing. That's the issue. As opposed to when someone would watch that maybe 10 years ago, they'd say, oh, can't wait for season 2, because they kind of would know it was going to happen, if that makes sense. But now shows have become so highly budgeted and so performance rating and all that type of stuff that even if a good show comes out, you don't even know if it's going to get a second season. Even games are the same way. And again, I feel like we're tipping a lot into gaming in this one. But Jedi Fallen Order, that was a really good game. People really loved it. And for a long time, we just didn't know if there was a sequel coming. And like, I feel like that's where media is now. If it's not great, it doesn't tick every box, or it's not part of a cinematic universe, essentially don't expect a season 2 until later on. And funnily enough, this is part of the cinematic universe, but whereas oppositely X-Men, you knew it was going to have a season 2. X-Men 97, you knew it was going to have a season 2 before the first season came out. So I don't know. You are right in a way. I'm glad they did it artistically. I don't love it in the sense of usually once upon a time you get news within the day or two after the show had released that season 2 is coming, right?
Right.
Once upon
which
a time.
I would much more appreciate, and I'm sure that it will have a season 2 of some sort. But at the same time, it's a challenging thing because a lot of Disney properties, like Endgame, we know that hey, this is going to get a part 2. We know that they're not just going to leave it here. But if for whatever reason something had happened and they weren't able to get the budget for a season for the finishing of that, it would have been
that would have been it would have been like what.
Yeah. So we do have this expectation of like, oh, things are never going to last. Like, don't get your hopes up. And I don't know. I love the show. I did. I got heartbreak in the moments of heartbreak. I felt for the characters. And there were just some moments where I'm like, you really just had to have this end this. It felt obligatory that it was going to end this way. I didn't feel like it was earned. It's not like Wanda captured someone that was also. I know that obviously Thor comes in and Thor could theoretically rival Hulk, but not a fucking cosmic Hulk, man. Like if you were going to do that,
I will say
don't think they nerfed Hulk enough or boosted Thor enough to make this worth a. Oh yeah, this is the opening that he needed to, or that she needed to go and touch him. That I'm fine with. She's a super powerful witch. That I get. I don't think it was earned enough.
What my thing is, and what I'll say is, I think the issue is fundamentally that, and someone said it, and I think this is very true, is that they keep going back to the Infinity Stones. And I don't think they needed to. And I get why they did a little bit because it was linked to the Thanos thing that they were trying to wrap up from the What If episode. I think they could have done that in a way without making it all about the Infinity Stones again. We are 6 years out from the Infinity Stones now, right?
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's make something different. Let's do something different. And more to the point, it didn't feel thematic with the rest. What I mean by that is if it was some kind of, I would almost have preferred if there was some kind of, do you know what they should have really done? And I think this would have been a much more cool way, is if the Hulk had somehow survived against Scarlet Witch from before. Because if you remember, that happened in the What If episode, they fought in that episode. If he had survived and fell through the green door, and you do cosmic horror versus zombies, and you could have done something with that, and that would have been cooler, in my opinion. Now, I know that that's more recent comics, and I know that they kind of sometimes are constrained, and this is the thing with this show, right? And What If in general, it's constrained by what the MCU is doing or has done, and what budget they have and what actors they can bring back. And so this show, as opposed to X-Men or as opposed to Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, those shows that are also coming out currently, those shows don't have any holds on them because they're not linked to that, you know? Whereas this show is, because it's MCU based, there's only so much they can do. And I think that's why the Infinity Stones are used so much. But like, I mean, just there, I changed one thing and suddenly the show seems a lot more interesting. Because imagine if it was the Hulk versus Scarlet Witch, like both had armies that were, one was linked to the Green Door and one's linked to this plague, essentially, the zombie plague.
And again, it'd be much more interesting. It would feel, I think the other issue I had, because I noticed this in the first episode, was, okay, it's been 18 minutes and you have this perfect cut to black. You could have stretched this out into 8 19-minute episodes. I think I would have been more content with that, because then it's like, oh, this is actually doing wrong. I still would have finished it all as quickly as I did. But it would have felt more like, oh my God, this has been going on. How is this going to result? Like, I would have been craving that. Oh shit. Like, but it was 4. And it was like, oh.
What I also think.
Just got 4. So
what I was reading up about this. So a lot of it's to do with what we've just said about the MCU, but also some of it's to do with budget. So some of the guy, I think, is it Brad Winterbaum? I think it might be his name. I sorry if I've got that wrong. But the guys who were creating this show, they had like loads more concepts. They had it to the point where they knew like 10 other characters, where they were and what they were doing. They even wanted to make it a movie, but they couldn't because of Spider-Man rights. And so basically this show is them making a love letter to Marvel Zombies with what they had. Essentially, which is a shame. But I think this is the thing with these connected universes, and I'm the biggest proponent of them, right? But like, I think Marvel has gotten too red tape about its own universe now. Whereas you have, and I think that's some of it's to do with the legal stuff. I feel like if they rebooted the universe now, it wouldn't be so bad going forward because they can use everything they've ever made.
Right.
But I think that's part of the problem. As opposed to you look at DC right now, and I know you've watched Superman, but not necessarily the others. But DC, James Gunn's just using characters where he wants. Like the newest episode of Peacemaker just came out, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there's some stuff in there that's just like, bam, they just threw it in. He's just like, yep, I did that previously, doing it now, doing it again. Because he can just decide that, right? He can just go, bam, we're putting that in. And I think that's what they've lost in Marvel a bit.
Yeah, I know you said you haven't watched Rick and Morty, but you've you're familiar. So there's a whole episode where they talk about the contrivances in movies, and ironically, you want to guess who's in that episode?
James Gunn.
James Gunn him fucking self, his own voice and everything. But the whole point is like, in the theoretical future, he's like making this trilogy of movies, and it kind of is the comment you were making earlier about the Dave Filoni-ness of it all. Of if you do enough, at some point you'll just get so deep into yourself and no one will tell you no, that it's just not quite as enjoyable. Like I think that was some of the issue that people had with Taika Waititi in the Marvel films.
In regards
his fun movies, but he's not making great Marvel movies, and that's the trick of it. Of like, where do we blend this like fun, happy, and there's fun in Marvel. The first Iron Man is a perfect example of like fun mixed with drama, right?
Yeah.
At some points it just feels almost too silly. Like some of his other works tackle silliness and drama really, really well.
Jojo Rabbit, right?
Good Jojo Rabbit, Our Flag Means Death, like all those fantastic shows, which are not Marvel Zombies, but in this commentary of, okay, so we are going to take this either too seriously, not seriously enough. It's so hard to find a middle these days, I think. And that is honestly one of my biggest issues, because Zombies started out really strong.
Yeah.
It was this, hey, we're getting these new characters in. We're already familiar with these characters. We're limited on who we've included. You're absolutely right. And then at the end, it's just like, okay, and it was all for what? Like, that's my biggest issues with, especially villains in movies. I'm like, okay.
They get rid of them.
You achieve your goals, then what?
Yeah.
What do you do after you achieve your goal?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's why Zemo is one of my favorite villains, because he didn't really have an end goal beyond
he just wanted to
he was just
kill
like,
these people. Yeah.
I want to break up the Avengers. That's it. That is I have nothing past this. If it wasn't for Black Panther, he would have fucking killed himself.
Yeah.
And that would have been done. And that's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Like there is an end goal that is going to be achievable. Then once you wipe out half the universe, okay, what then? You got to wait a little bit longer. Okay, then you got to remake the universe. Okay, what then? Like there's no end goal for your villain that does anything, except for heroes to then rise again. It's an endless cycle that I think the MCU is trapped in, rather than benefiting from. Of, we have all this potential, but when does it end? When do we say we're finally done?
I think this is why, and like I don't want. I've spoken about this in passing. I think we spoke about it. Me and Nate spoke about it during the Fantastic Four episode. I'm at the point now where, because they've got everything back now, I think they should just reset. I don't want to reset, if I'm being completely honest, because I think a lot of the stuff that they've done has been quite good still. I still relatively enjoyed it, and I enjoy a lot of the actors in the roles they're playing. And some of them have only just started out, like Fantastic Four has only just started, and I feel like those characters, even despite the movie wasn't my favorite, those characters could be good down the line, if you know what I mean, the people playing them.
Absolutely.
But I think having a universe that starts fresh, and even if you do keep a lot of the actors, you can do what James Gunn's just done with Peacemaker. You can keep John Cena as Peacemaker and make the universe around that to a degree, right? So you can do it. But but like, what I guess I'm saying is that I think I want a universe where the X-Men have always existed, where the Avengers exist, where the Fantastic Four exist, and just start fresh on a universe that is more comic booky. I think that's my thing, and I think that because they have everything now, ham it up a little bit and play more comic booky than you have with the sort of realism they've gone to the extent of like everything has to be tactical armor and everything has to be, you know what I mean? Like we're only just getting sort of comic booky suits in these movies, and that's because they've realized that that's what people actually want. People want it like comic books, and they want to read them. They don't want to pretend that they're watching something other than a comic book when they're watching a comic book movie, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, it does.
So yeah, I think
I know it's just another retelling of, hey, Marvel's trying their best. They're trying to keep material pumping out, and it gets there, but it's just a little bit short. I felt the same with Echo. I started catching up on Marvel because during the whole there were things. I won't get too far into that because politics. But I finished watching Brave New World. I finished watching the Marvels. I finished watching oh boo, there was another show in between there and there. I watched Agatha all along. Fantastic, by the way. I fucking love that shit. But those had some level of conclusion, and especially Agatha. I thought, okay, this is a fun conclusion. It's a good like, oh hey, we could have fun here.
yes,
but we don't
if
have
not,
to.
it's not the end of the world. Yeah.
Versus Kamala, like at the end of this one, oh, so you're gonna have to do something, or people are going to be extremely disappointed. Like, it's one thing to say like, okay, she shakes her hands, takes the deal,
and then you
done.
left it.
That's the end of the
because you get
That's
to
the end of the
decide. You get to decide what happens. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It leaves more to the imagination as opposed to, okay, so they have to either come back or they won't.
Yeah.
Which either way, you're going to be waiting and you're dissatisfied, or you're going to be. It's going to fall. I worry about it falling flat. I do.
To be honest, I take on board what you're saying, and I think because of the way the culture is, and and that's the industry, the movie and film industry, the TV and film industry, etc. I don't disagree with any of your points. Artistically, I actually think it's a very smart zombies move, if you know what I mean. That this universe actually ends on basically, well, nothing's really changed since the beginning of your journey, Kamala, apart from all these people are also dead. And I think that's a really interesting, because Kamala has to go from this person who is so hopeful, and at the end of the show, she gets that hope sort of rewarded, only for it to then not be the case.
Gosh, twice.
Yeah, it is for me is actually the perfect kind of horror ending in a way. But I get what you're saying. I totally agree with you in the sense of, for a Marvel property, that's hard to swallow because we have basically been predicated on the fact that everything in Marvel is predicated on the fact that this will mean something at some point, or this will be connected to something at some point, and that's what they sort of raised us to believe, Marvel wise. This isn't your like, for example, Sinners. I've watched that recently, the movie by what's his name? What's his name?
I couldn't say anything more about the movie other than like that's all.
Either way, I'm forgetting the director's name off my top of my head. I don't know why. It's the guy who did. Is it the guy who just did BP? It is, isn't it? 1 second.
Oh,
I'm sure it is. Sinners. 1 second.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
I'm gonna look it up. Why is his name eluding me? Ryan Coogler. Yeah. I knew it was. I was thinking that it was on the tip of my tongue, but I did. Anyway, so that movie ends with a scene. I'm not going to go into it because anyone who ends up watching it, etc. But that movie ends on a scene that actually, arguably, could set up something else if they wanted to, and is quite. It's not a happy necessarily ending in a way. There's a lot of unresolved things there that are actually relatively sad in a way. But what is interesting about that is that if that never makes another movie, you get to decide what happens to those characters. It's exactly what you've just said. And so,
I think,
but that's because we don't expect anything, right? We don't expect another movie.
No, and that's the best part of, like, with traditional horror, you're going to have the movies that end with, oh, guess what? Freddy Krueger is here in the car with us, or he is the car, or you get Jason dun 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 dun. Like, you hear the Halloween theme at the end. Even in the fucking one of the original horror books, you hear the essence of Dracula laughing after he's been, burned by the sun.
Yeah.
The what if is the point of horror. If you don't think that it's over,
that you're meant to
know.
You're meant to go to sleep still thinking about it in a way, right?
Correct.
You're meant to go away from it still thinking about it.
Yeah, and this one I'm like, okay, I don't have to think about this until it's done. Like, it doesn't have that satisfying horror ending of, oh my god, like, if they just had the last, and I know they did, of Wanda like screaming at you as the last frame, but they didn't include the Kamala scene in there, where it's like, oh, everything's back to normal. I would have been fine. I'd have been fine if the last thing we see is Wanda screaming.
I get what you mean. I do get what you mean because it's Marvel. If it was any other show, that ending would have been fine as regards what you're saying. But what you're saying is because it's Marvel, we expect things to continue, arguably, and so now we want more. Essentially, it's not a thought-provoking ending. It's basically the and it is to me, to clarify, and not in a way that I'm saying that you're wrong. I'm saying it in the sense of I'm perfectly okay if we never get a second season. What you're saying is Marvel has set us up to basically expect second season, and that's the difference, right? I'm saying yes, but you're saying yes and, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. We're agreeing that this is over.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is that difference between what we expect to happen, and it's just a little off. Again, it's not bad by any means. I love the show. It's just it's when you have an amazing meal and there's a little weird aftertaste. That I'm like, I don't know how.
Yeah, I will say what I will say is, though, as a separate point, I think Kamala was really well characterized in this. It was really great to see her with Spider-Man. That's something like they have a different voice actor for the show because I don't think they can use Tom Holland, if I remember correctly.
Didn't they in What If?
It's the same guy from the first episode of What If, which was like, I think he's called Hudson Thames or something like that.
It did not sound like that. It did not sound like the same character. That's like when I first watched the What If Zombies. It did not. I was rewatching as we were like starting to like listening for the voice. I'm like, that sounds distinctly different. So I don't know if you just went through puberty.
But it's been a few years, potentially that. So that I think was a really fun point. Seeing crossovers that you wouldn't expect to happen, like Blade and Kamala. Seeing Icarus be used, by the way, and Khonshu as well.
Icarus. Fucking the death of the fallen gods. I was like,
that was actually really cool. God, I actually really liked that part.
Yeah, I love Zombies for that. The surprise of how are we going to see these characters?
Yeah,
fucking Jimmy Woo, of course.
Yes, and there was comedy in it still, and there was some fun moments, and very Marvel-esque. But there you go. And Yelena's relationship with Alexei being portrayed in a very different way to the Thunderbolts movie, but still somewhat. I think that expanded that in a way, right? I think seeing, and this is what an alternate universe should do, by the way, is inform the original relationship in a way that that those things could happen if things went a different way. You know what I mean?
It went a different way from Widow, right? Because Widow takes place just before Endgame, so therefore, Mom, Dad, everybody there is together in a way, or they rejoined after because zombie plague. Hey, Mom has a solution. Great. Pigs.
Well, yeah, I actually think that was a very smart. Some of the ways they used some of the media from previous was actually pretty smart. Because I don't know if I'd have thought of that.
When I saw the raft, I was so excited.
Yeah, the raft was actually a really cool point. Namor being there was obviously a very fun point as well.
He felt more godlike than I remember him being in Black Panther 2, but I don't know if that was just me.
I mean, the way I see it is they're all being empowered by the Scarlet Witch to some degree. Because they're making this is one thing I think fell short for me, and I'm going to make this critique, and I think we should start wrapping up. We're getting on the hour point here, but the thing with zombies, and this is my critique versus the comics, is that zombies in the comics is a lot more a moral based question for the zombies, in that the zombies the zombies understand that they need to eat, but they hate themselves for doing it, essentially.
See, I would have loved that, but it would have taken so much longer.
It would. That's the issue, and that's why I want people to see the show and then go and read the comics. And that's what I'll leave with you guys on this one. If you enjoyed the show, go and read the comics because the comics are fantastic. There is if you need sort of any compelling, there is a point in the comics where Spider-Man is turned. And he is turned, and he is in the house with his Aunt May. And I will leave that to you guys to sort of ruminate on.
I think I've seen that.
And he absolutely loathes himself afterwards. But go and read it. Honestly, go and read it. There's some really interesting, very interesting storyline for Wasp in it. Black Panther's storyline is actually somewhat similar to the one that happens in the What If episode. So if you were interested in how that panned out, which sounds a bit weird, but you know what I mean, go and watch that, because it is really interesting. So, Tater, final thoughts.
Fantastic show. A lot of good points. Again, just a weird taste in my own personal mouth because of my experience with horror, my experience with Marvel, just where we are at in the world right now. It's just a bit odd. Not bad, odd.
Yeah, and I get it. I think definitely you could have used maybe one more episode where you kind of see a little bit more of, like, not even one more episode, maybe another 5 minutes on the end that you see, or cut it out. Yeah. There's two different ways you could do it.
Because then you can open the next season with, oh hey, come on,
you can start the universe there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we shall leave it there for now, guys. Thank you for listening to this new episode of For What It's Nerd. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I don't know what we're going to be discussing next week, but I'm sure we'll pick something. And the week after, Peacemaker finishes. So 2 weeks' time, we'll be discussing the ending of Peacemaker, which apparently leads directly into Man of Tomorrow, the second Superman movie that has been announced. So, keep an eye out for that. Until then, Tater and I are signing off. Thank you again for joining, Tater.
Yes, of course. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yeah.
And subscribe, do
all that thing. Do the stuff.
Hype.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.